Tuesday morning in the city of Lagos, Southwest Nigeria. My name is Damlola Okunshaki. All right, let's move straight to the front pages of the dailies this morning. I'm starting with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with governors out to win the 2023 polls by choking opposition. That's coming from IPAC. Governors preventing oppositions from selling their manifestos in the states. IPAC chair allergies. INEC, please EFCC, ICPC move against money politics. INEC to sign MOU with road marine transport unions today. Alt official sabotage of elections. Falana urges the security agencies, says the anti-democratic forces compromising our polls. You can see that story on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper. And here we have a photo story with writer that says a coalition of CSOs protesting in support of CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele in Abuja yesterday, and you can see them with different placards. Now on page 8, court rejects DSSB to arrest and detain Emefiele. A protest trail DSS moves. He's not a terrorist, say CSOs. A fought suit against CBN governor. Protesters won. And moving on page 11, alleged killing of 100 Northerners in Southeast live from pit of hell. That's coming from Wanese. Says a report politically motivated, calls for investigation of alarmists. Leah Sharibu, federal government trying to secure our freedom. Minister is saying that marketers are seek subsidy on diesel to lower petrol price. You can see that on page 9. Crisis. PDP will overcome challenges. That's coming from Autumn. Maritime workers threaten to shut nation's port. You can see that story on page 28. Stories above. Bandits killed 28 in Kaduna. Security personnel terrorists killed in Zamfara ambush. Okupe gets a 2-year jail term for money laundering. His conviction will not demoralize me. That's coming from Peter Obi. You can see that story on pages 9 and 12. Federal government VAT CIT revenue rise 25% to 3.5 trillion naira. You can see that on page 19. And we have the big interview. A potent anti-cancer drug awaiting clinical trials. That's coming from Professor Oyenekwe, and you can see that story on page 14 of the Vanguard newspaper. Away from that, we'll move to the Nation, and the Nation this morning is leading with workers to get better deal. Tinubu assures NLC and TUC. Ex-Lakers governor presents plan to union leaders. Labour gives APC candidate charter of demands, and there's a quote here that says, I seek a Nigeria where sufficient jobs with decent wages give people the chance to live better lives. Where the private sector thrives, where the private sector cannot do it alone. My government will take the lead in lending a helping hand. You can see more on page 25 of the Nation newspaper. Civil societies to EFCC shun politics. Woman disarms kidnappers, free 3 hostages. You can see that on page 4. Stories above, we have bandits killed 28 in southern Kaduna, raised many houses. Lastly, on the Nation, petrol scarcity persists as motorists groan. Marketers seek equity allocation. You can see that story on page 28 of the Nation newspaper. And the Guardian this morning is leading with APC failed on 40,000 MW. Promise rations 4,000 MW, that's electricity. Stakeholders insist Buhari failed in sector despite 1.7 billion naira intervention and $3 billion loan. Nigerians paying for darkness says, okay. Amadi, sector worst in last 7 years. You can see that story on page 6. Lastly, on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, we have politicians unhappy with moves to block vote buying, says INEC. You can see that story on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. Now let's move to the Punch newspaper. The Punch is leading with rising attacks, vote buying threatened polls. INEC cries out. Commission says violence may mar election, prevents a presidential poll winner from emerging. Electoral body plans supplementary budget to replace destroyed buildings, equipment, and others. Inspector General, EFCC boss warned politicians against inducements. Survey put 33 states on vote buying watch list. You can see that story on page 2. Yeah, we have 2 photo stories. We read that says money laundering. Okupe pays 13 million naira, escapes 2-year jail term. You can see that on page 24. My husband confessed to oral sex with my niece. That's coming from Doctor's Wife. You can see that story on page 5. Stories above, Naira redesign will affect poor Nigerians. SMEs is saying that, and that's coming from World Bank. Federal government begins 11 power project plans, 3,750 MW generation. Lastly, on the front page of the Punch newspaper, Air Force battles Zamfara terrorists, 50 bandits, soldiers killed. You can see that story inside the Punch newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages this morning. Join us after the break for the analysis. Welcome back. If you're just joining me, this is Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Okunshaki. Joining me to analyze the front pages of the dailies this morning is Mr. Dayo Akintobi. He's the publisher of Ilupeji Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning, Damilola. Compliments of the season to all our viewers and to everybody at Vanguard Life.
Yes, and okay, there's a story trending now on social media and everywhere on the front pages of the dailies, and that's the story of the Director General of Labour Party, Presidential Campaign Council, that's Doyin Okupe, and the fact that he has been sentenced to 2 years for breaching the Money Laundering Act. So what do you think about this? I mean, it's surprising Nigerians.
He was convicted and sentenced to 2 years with the option of a fine. He, of course, took the option of the fine, paid 13 million naira, and didn't have to go to jail. Some people have a tendency to think that's a subversion of justice, because when you look at situations where rich people or well-to-do people can buy their way out of jail by the option of a fine, whereas poor people who did things not as grievous, who don't have the option of a fine or who can afford to pay the fine, they're not going to jail for long periods. So it's actually a subversion of justice. But well, it is what it is. In terms of its impact on the current electoral process and political campaign season, as we all know, Mr. Okupe is the DG of the Obidati campaign organization. He's the Director General. Director General, that's the topmost operative in the entire campaign. So you begin to ask yourself, the Obidati campaign is based completely on fighting corruption. That's why their tagline is, we know they give shishi. It means we don't give any money for any purpose whatsoever. We are anti-corruption, anti-dirty money. To now have the head of that campaign to be convicted of money laundering, it doesn't look very well. It doesn't look good for him to continue to be the head of that campaign and for that campaign to still be credible. Now, Peter Obi made a statement yesterday that he's still studying the judgment, that he won't be demoralized by what has happened. He thinks it's a witch hunt to truncate his campaign. He says they've been doing all kinds of things to frustrate him. They grounded his private jet that he used to get around. They grounded that under some specious reasons. Now they've convicted his DG. That all of these things are meant to try and frustrate him and demoralize him, but he won't allow that to happen. On the surface, as a concerned Nigerian, I think that either Doyin Okupe should step aside or resign so that he doesn't malign his candidate and doesn't hurt his candidate's chances. Because truth be told, he's been convicted by a court of competent jurisdiction. Although what he was convicted for is things emanating from the Jonathan administration, had to do with monies he collected from Dasuki. Now, he wasn't convicted that he stole money. He wasn't convicted that he took government money and didn't do what he was supposed to do. What he was convicted of was that he received money in cash. There are some anti-money laundering laws that say anything that's more than 5 million naira in financial transaction, it has to go through a bank. I can't just come with the Ghana must go bank and give you 5, 6, 7, 10 million in cash and you take it without it having come through a bank. Well, apparently he just went to Dasuki's office, collected Ghana must go bag with 200 and something million in it, and took it away from there to go and divide among whoever and share among whoever. So he's been convicted for violating the Money Laundering Act by collecting in excess of 5 million naira in cash from Dasuki. The court did not look at what the money was for, the purposes behind it. They didn't look at Dasuki's role. All they said was, look, so he had like 50 something counts. They dismissed 30 something. The only part that the court addressed and convicted him on was the violation of the Money Laundering Act of having cash of more than 5 million naira. But that still sullies his reputation and could spill over into sullying the campaign theme of the Obi Dati campaign. So I would say either Peter Obi should remove him or he should do the honorable thing and step aside or resign, even though that's not a common thing for us to do here in Nigeria.
All right, another story that is also trending is the fact that a minister said they're in touch with Leah Sharibu's family and the fact they're also trying to secure her release. I mean, this is after years. What do you think about that?
That poor lady has been in captivity for over 5 years. I believe she was the one of the Chibok girls or something like that.
Yes.
And it's been more than 5 years since she's been in captivity. And I want to believe that government has not forgotten her matter. I think it's a bit sad that 5 years later is when we're now saying government is intensifying efforts to try and secure her release. I think that, we have a tendency that as time passes, the urgency of things have a tendency to wane. And that may have been what happened. Remember when Chibok girls first happened, it was in the news every day. There were protests, bring back our girls. But as time went by and nothing happened, people moved on with their lives. So, but unfortunately, the girl's family cannot move on with their lives because it's their loved one who's still in captivity after 5 years. So it's good to know that government is still on it. The Minister for Women Affairs, Pauline Talent, was talking about it yesterday. She said she's visited with the family, that President Buhari gave her a helicopter and security to go and meet the family in Yola, and that they've never relented on efforts to bring her home. But I think that rather than just yesterday to have been reassuring the public, they should have continued over the last 5 years to give us updates and to reassure us. This government has not really been that great in terms of information dissemination, in terms of selling its policies, its programs, and engaging with the public to keep us abreast of all the things it's doing. And that's why it gets a lot of backlash. So even if it is true that for the last 5 years, they've never relented on bringing her home, the bottom line is they've not communicated that to us. So we don't know. As far as we're concerned, it looks to us like they've forgotten this poor girl. So why are you now coming at the 99th hour to now say, oh, you are intensifying efforts to bring her home? You should never have relented. You should have been intensifying those efforts over the last 5 years without let or hindrance. And you should have been letting us know you're doing it. So that's what's making it not look so good that they're saying that now.
All right, let's move straight to the stories trending on the front pages of the dailies this morning. So ahead of now, of course, 2023 general election, the 18 registered political parties in Nigeria, they've called out the state governors. They accuse them of trying to sabotage the electoral process by stifling the opposition in their various states. Even a human rights activist, that's Emefiele, also he asked security agents to arrest those who claim to be anti-democratic forces.
Politics is a zero-sum game. Especially in Nigeria, winner takes all. You do everything within your power to propagate your own campaign and diminish the campaign of your opposition. That's what politics is all over the world. However, the tactics and the methodology by which you suppress the opposition and enhance your own interest has to be within the ambit of the law. And this is the problem here. State governors are using their authority within their state to stifle campaigns. For example, the venues, like Tafawa Balewa Square, National Stadium, Eagle Square in Abuja. The people who control those are the local authorities, the subnationals. They're the ones that control all these venues where we have campaigns. They're the ones that can give you a permit to do a rally or a walk on the streets of their city. So what is now happening is the governors are flexing their muscles and saying, when it's the turn of the opposition to want to paste posters, put billboards up, use our venues for rallies, have walks on our streets. What we will do to make it difficult for them is to charge exorbitant fees or even say the venues are not available. That's political chess play whereby each person is trying to outmaneuver each person. But the Constitution guarantees freedom of assembly, guarantees freedom of speech, guarantees so many freedoms that you cannot openly subdue or reject somebody's desire to assemble peacefully. So if a political party says they want to assemble at a stadium within your jurisdiction to have a rally, and because you are your opposition, you say, oh yeah, pay 50 million naira. When your normal charges maybe 500,000, you say pay 50 million naira because you know they can't afford to pay it. So that's a backdoor way of subverting their right to peaceful assembly, their right to freedom of speech by which they can express their manifestos and talk about the things they would do. So politicians, like I said, it's a zero-sum game. Winner takes all. So there is no sentiment about, oh, let's be gentle here and oh, let's give him a break and allow him to campaign. No. Carpe diem. You seize the day. You take advantage where you have advantage because your opponent is going to take advantage against you too when he is in the driver's seat. However, you have to do it within the purview of the law. So when they're getting to this point where the NGOs and Falano and others are now complaining that they are being anti-democratic, it means that they've gone beyond the pale. They've exceeded the bounds of decency. They've exceeded the bounds of legality to wherein it is now openly just trying to subdue the opposition. You do it with tact. You do it with diplomacy. You can't be blatant about it. But let's not kid ourselves. The people who are complaining now, if the shoe was on the other foot and they were in the driver's seat, they would do the exact same thing. So it's politics at play here, nothing strange.
All right, let's talk about vote buying. I mean, when you're talking about election, you cannot take out vote buying. And the fact that they started complaining of vote buying now, that politicians are trying to buy the PVCs from the poor people, from the poor in Nigeria. Now, my question is, the beavers, is there a way the beavers can prevent this from really affecting?
The beavers can't be compromised, and that biometric verification, it means that only the person who owns the PVC can use it to vote. So you ask yourself, politicians who are buying these PVCs, what is their mission? Because they can't give it to somebody else to go and use it. It has to be the person who is registered to that PVC. That's what the beavers is all about. It's about accrediting the person presenting himself to confirm that the person presenting himself is the person who is on that PVC. So what is the purpose? It's twofold. Number one could be that they're removing those PVCs from contention. Perhaps a political party knows that I'm weak in this particular area, my opponent is strong, so let me reduce his votes by buying the PVCs of his voters. I'm going to go and lock them up in a safe and keep them out so those people can vote. So that will reduce the number of votes that his opposition will get. That could be number one. Number two, we're also hearing on good authority that some of the people who are buying these PVCs are using it to market politicians to say, look, I've got 1,000 PVCs here. Those 1,000 votes are committed to you because he's paid people for those PVCs, right? On election day, he'll give each of them their PVC because he's already paid them for their vote. So they will go in and they will cast their vote that way. So these middlemen are now using this to market politicians to say, I can deliver so many votes and here's the proof. This is the PVCs. All these PVCs will vote for you. So vote buying is going on. It's just moved to another level now because technology has been introduced that frustrates the ability to do it the way we used to do it before, which is stand at the polling booth and give everybody money. However, the thing I have always thought about vote buying is that it might even be more hyped than the reality. I'll tell you why. Because when you get into that polling booth and you thumb that ballot paper, it's between you and your God what you've thumbed. The person who gave you money for your vote can't see what you thumbed. Because after you've done your thumbing, you fold the paper before you come out of the polling booth and you put it in the bag. Of course, the problem then becomes if somebody has bought all the votes, paid for all the votes from one party, and then they count the votes and they didn't get any votes, he now wonders, you people didn't vote. I gave you money, you didn't vote. The votes went elsewhere. But nonetheless, I still think that when they are paying for votes, I'm not sure that it really works the way they think it works because they have no way of policing it. Nobody's going to go inside the voting booth with you to see that you actually thumb what you're supposed to thumb. And Even if after the election is over, they discover that they didn't get as many votes as they paid for, who are they going to hold? It has happened, it has happened. Can they go and report you to police? What can they do? So I don't think vote buying is as big a problem. I think they're just throwing their money away, really. So anybody who wants to come and give you money for your vote, by all means collect their money, but vote your conscience when you get into the booth. And that conscience should particularly not even be the person who gave you money. For the very reason I tried to give you money is the very reason you should vote against him anyway, because obviously for him to be wanting to pay you off, it means he doesn't have the best interest of the country at heart.
Yeah, sure. All right, let's move away from that. So, massive protests yesterday rocked Abuja. That's following the discovery of a suit allegedly filed by a DSS, where it accused the governor of CBN, that's Mr. Godwin Emefiele, of financing terrorism, as well as other crimes it described as economic crimes of national security dimension. What do you think about that?
That's befuddling. Since that story broke yesterday, it's been confounding the mind and one trying to make sense of it, because on the surface it doesn't make sense. The CBN governor is the custodian of our national treasury. He basically runs the economy. And you ask yourself, what would he have to do with terrorism? What would he have to do with the financing of terrorism? Was he used? Was his office taken advantage of by unscrupulous elements? Who knows? But for the DSS, which is an arm of government, reporting directly to the president, to be making a case against the CBN governor, which is also an arm of government, directly accounting to the government. I don't believe the DSS could have taken such a step without the president knowing about it. But word on the street is that this is trying to frustrate the cash limits that Godwin Emefiele is putting in place, because it's going to make it difficult for the political players to be able to spend money during this election to use to buy votes, to use to win people, to use to invest in all the various publicity, propaganda, social media, all the things that create buzz around the campaign. It takes money. So the word is that the major political players are opposed to Godwin Emefiele because the steps he has taken recently, the currency redesign, which of course has left some politicians flat-footed with billions of naira in cash stored away in vaults and bullion vans and in soakaways all over the place. So that was the first blow. Then the second blow comes with this issue of you can't withdraw more than 20,000 naira in a day, 100,000 naira in a week. You can't this, you can't that, you can't that, which restricts the ability of illicit cash. Because you see, when you're doing illicit things like vote buying or influencing voting patterns, you don't want a record. Transfers, because remember, they're not saying we can't spend money, they're just saying it has to be electronically, which leaves a footprint, leaves a digital footprint. Every transfer you do is traceable. They know who you sent it to, they know who sent it, they know how much, they know what time, they know how regularly you paid that money and things like that. So those who are spending illicit cash, they don't want a footprint. Cash on the barrel head, I give you money, we have a tete-a-tete. There's no record, no transaction occurred. It's between me and you. So it makes sense that that might be what's at play, than to think that the CBN governor, who's one of the leading positions in this administration, is giving money to fund terrorists. Yeah, it's just too far-fetched for my mind to be able to comprehend. So I would go lean better towards that notion, especially because the way the DSS went about it, they filed something called ex parte motion, friend of the court, which means that it wasn't open. They didn't accuse him openly and serve him papers and say, let's meet in court. They went to the court behind his back, filed the document, and even then the court said they didn't even specify. They didn't spell his name out in full. They just said Mr. Emefiele. The court said, you didn't describe this person in full. You didn't give adequate details. You are coming to file a one-sided application seeking his detention for 60 days. You've not clarified what you think. You've just given a general description that he's financing terrorism. You've not given any adequate, specific enough information or evidence that we can hold on to. So I'm not going to give you any authority to detain him for any 60 days because you've not persuaded the court that you have it. Yeah. So this is a problem. If the DSS begins to become used as a political tool to go after people, that was in the days of military. They used to use the Secret Service to go after enemies of the government and enemies of the people. But if the DSS is in a position where it's now being used as a political tool to witch hunt both friends and enemies of the administration, then our very liberties are in danger.
Yeah, true. But let's just quickly talk about this. Now, of course, the Naira redesign. There are rumors and no, there are talks that there are actually lots of fake money spreading around the country now from the new currency. What do you think about this?
There's no currency that's not vulnerable to being faked, even the dollar, all of them. But part of the reason for the redesign that was given to us was that they've put in greater security features that make it harder to counterfeit. But yet here we are about a week after the release,
Just
we're
a
already
week
saying
after.
that it's being counterfeit. So you ask yourself, so what was the purpose of the redesign? Apart from the fact that you wanted hordes of cash that have been salted away somewhere to be brought back out into circulation. Ostensibly, the other major reason they gave was added security features to make it harder to counterfeit. Well, a week later, they've counterfeited it. We saw news reports where they showed counterfeit. I will say that across the world, counterfeiting of currency is a problem. That's why you find countries moving away from cash. You find them in cryptocurrency, you find them in Bitcoin, you find them in e-money. Remember the e-naira? You find them in e-money. So governments across the world have battled that problem for a long time. As long as it's a piece of matter, physical matter, it can be compromised, it can be. But what is shocking here is the speed with which it has been counterfeited and the fact that government said they put added security features to make it harder to counterfeit. You would expect that they'd be working on it for the next 10 years, the counterfeiters, and can't get a breakthrough. For them to have done it in a week,
Just a week.
it means that these added security features failed. And whoever we paid money to give us those security features should give us a refund because it didn't work. And then secondly, of course, we need to just move faster and faster away from currency, which of course is why they're putting in all these cash limits, is to encourage electronic transactions.
All right, let's just end this with Messi's win. Argentina won the World Cup, and
Yes.
we'll be talking about this on Sunday. I know you're a fan of the football, so what do you think about Messi's win?
Well, I think it was a wonderful thing. I think it was a wonderful cap to a stellar career. I mean, the World Cup trophy is the pinnacle of a footballing career, and he's won just about every other thing. And the thing that endears him to people is his humility. He's not arrogant. He's not the type who has swagger. He's very gentle. He's, humble. He's a typical iconic superstar, and he was very deserving of finally getting that trophy. So, of course, it puts Argentina in the pantheon of great countries that have perennially, because this is their third time they won it with Maradona in the 80s. So this is their third time winning it. But it was really a glorification of Messi's career because he had indicated that after this World Cup, he was going to retire from international tournaments. Well,
He changed his tone.
there's a saying, you should go out when the ovation is loud.
Yes.
His ovation is loud now. He has arrived finally. He's in the pantheon of football gods, and he's bowing out gracefully at this time.
Yes, true. Let's end this with Mr. and Mrs. And the first person speaking this morning is Mrs. She says, Dear, your birthday was 3 days ago, and you've not finished the piece of cake I served you. And Mr. replied, I'm tired of eating this type of cake. Why can't you guys cut pieces of assorted meat like cow leg, cow tail, etc. in the cake instead?
Did Mr. leave money for all that to go inside the cake? And we should ask our bakers too, can we put assorted meat in flour and bake it into a cake?
And sometimes men are not really into sugar like the women.
No, absolutely not.
Thank you, Mr. Dayo Akitobi, for joining me this
Pleasure
morning.
is all mine.
Yes, he's the publisher of Illupeju Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. He just reviewed and analyzed some of the stories on the front pages with us this morning. Now, to get more of our top stories, you can follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, our WhatsApp number is also displayed on your screen. I'm Damlola Ubushaki. It's bye from me on Today in the News.